was told yesterday, just keep it at a lower time. Look at that. Okay, guys, welcome to day 2 of the 1000 Speaker Academy. I want to know, guys, are you excited? Because we're going to go even further today. Our lineup of speakers today is absolutely incredible. You guys are going to have a great time. What I wanted us all to do is to look back at yesterday and tell me one of your takeaways. I'm going to come, one of your aha moments, your epiphany, something that way you came through and you said, wow, I get that, this is something that I didn't realize before. This is something that I didn't know that I could do before. This is a great piece of knowledge. It could be from the visible guy, it could be from me, it could be from Vanessa, it could be from any of our speakers yesterday. What were one of your aha moments? Anybody? Raise your hand. All right, there you go, Bryce. Okay. And brilliant panel, by the way, Mr. Bryce. You were awesome.
I got a lot of insight into the delicateness of storytelling and the power of being able to relate something that is your own story and mirroring it so that it can be relatable for the experience of another person. Exactly. And how that's really a glue for the speaker in the audience.
Exactly. That is super awesome. I'm going to big hand for Bryce for sharing that. That's awesome. Who else had a moment where they went, wow, I get it. Now I have, a direction to my business. Who else had an aha moment? You got one? Okay, here. I'm going to come back to the visible guy. You got to sit down. You got to be more visible and be up.
So for me, it was, we're all very passionate about what we do, and that we really do run a global business. And when you think about it, the possible is no barriers. We just make excuses and then think that we're possible and hearing everyone's talk, which is really, to me, it's really inspiring. I mean, primarily after the inspiring conversation, this is a major story. It just said, you know what, we can all do this and we can all make a lot of money, but even better, we can actually make a great impact on people's lives as well. For me, it's fantastic.
That's awesome. Super awesome and fantastic. I love that. Who else? We got time for one more. Who else has one? Okay, you got 1, 2. Okay, awesome. I'm grabbing some stuff from back here. Okay, here we go. Yeah. Oh, he has one. There you go.
When we were talking about the off-stage stuff, James came up with an idea of preparing physically with breath and posture. And it reminded me of the times I've had to prepare in such a way before facing an audience. And it occurred to me that sometimes speaking, okay, you're getting this great idea out to people who need it. That's great. But personally, sometimes for a speaker, it's having content so that you've got an excuse to get the thrill of that dose that Manny was talking about, because it is quite an exciting experience to deal with your personal excitements and your ability to express those ideas to others, and it can be really invigorating.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. So I'm giving you guys, you 3 participatory people, a copy of my book. There you go. And you can. I really want to see this live from Australia. That would be awesome. It's worldwide. Okay, guys. So a couple of weeks ago, you guys have been. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a big live streamer. We're live streaming all of this. So I was doing 2-person interviews with a lot of you different guys as we moved into this exciting event. So. Is that me going off? Can you slide that or turn that off, please? Anyway, so one of the people that really blew me away was our next speaker. You're a little bit familiar with him yesterday from him being an excellent job as our MC yesterday, wasn't he, Mr. Raul Lopez? When you talk about things that you have overcome in your life and how you can overcome them, and then turn around and serve and help others, this gentleman is the epitome of that. I am so grateful to know him. He has inspired me to look at my own life a different way, and also to see how I can turn around and serve others and help others in my life. So without further ado, please welcome the astounding Raul Lopez Jr.
All right, good morning. How you guys doing? Good? Energy? Yeah. So, I usually do an hour and a half, and it involves training, and I'm going to break this down to 20 minutes with some bullet points. Again, I'm Raul Lopez Jr., author of Heal the Boy and the Man Will Appear. Learn the importance of understanding and expressing your emotions. I came to that through out of not understanding or expressing my emotions, and not even knowing that that was something that we can do in life and it would help us in life. I started when I was 7 years old. One traumatic event just led me on a life of destruction. And not understanding that I had the ability to express my emotions, to explain or ask for help, kind of got me into a mode of just darkness. So I'll go back. I was born into a very loving family. Born in San Jose in 1970, and my parents were kind of hippie style, loving. We traveled around in vans, we lived on farms. Just had this great start to life. My family was mixed as far as hers, yours, mine, everything. My mother had a couple of kids from her previous young marriage. My father had a daughter, and then they came together and they had me. So we all traveled around kind of like the Brady Bunch at the time. And I was very close with my father. Our bond was strong, like the sun to the earth. I mean, without him, I was nothing. And I followed him around. We played on the farm. We'd ride horses. I remember sneaking into his car when I knew he was off to college. I was sneaking into the back seat and I'd hide in the little floorboards there. And sometimes he'd see me. And he'd like drive in a circle and come back and he'd open the door and I think I was there. And he'd like, oh, I want to go with you, Daddy. And other times he wouldn't see me and he'd get all the way to his school. And he'd open the door and he'd be like, what are you doing here? So he'd have to take me into class. And I remember sitting there dropping candy all over the floor and just making noise and stuff. It was fun. We were really close. And for the first 7 years of my life, that was my life. Farm life, brothers, sisters, family, and just following my dad anywhere he'd go. And then that was all I knew at 7 years old, right? But what are children, right? Their love, their light, their joy, their everything that I believe God has us who we are, right? We're love, we're light. And that's all I knew. So at 7 years old, one day I was in the garage playing with my father, and my mother drives up. And she says, son, get in the car, we're going for a ride. And I said, okay. It wasn't uncommon. Where I lived, both sides of my family lived literally within like a 5-mile radius of us. So we would often go to grandma's house, we'd go to the store, we'd go to aunt's house, whatever. We'd go visit family and we'd do things. This time, that wasn't the case. She said, say goodbye to your dad, son. And I said, okay, bye, Dad. But I didn't understand the extent. And I remember driving away, and back in the 70s, I think everybody here that remembers no seatbelts? You didn't have to wear a seatbelt. You could jump around the car front and back. And I remember looking out the back window, standing in the back seat, waving at my dad, and he just kind of stood there and he looked at me and he waved. I think he knew what was going on, but I didn't. And next thing I know, we're on an airplane to Alaska, my mother and I. And it was interesting because, 7 years old, seen this big airplane, never been on a plane before. I thought, hey, cool. We get to Alaska, land of snow, and hey, cool, this is fun. About a day goes by, and I go, where's my dad? And she says, don't worry about your dad. And don't worry about my dad. What does that mean, don't worry about my dad? And at that age, I didn't understand this, but it was almost like a seed. She said, don't worry about your dad. So instantly, what did I do? I started to worry about my dad. Like, what do you mean, don't worry about him? He's been in my life every day. Every day since I can remember. We play, we do the whole thing. And so I continued to ask, and not even a week, 2 weeks, and I start to feel something. And I don't know what it is at that age. Looking back now, I understand it was confusion, right? That's an emotion, obviously. Confusion. I started to get some anxiety, like, where is he? I would ask for him. And she started to say, you're not going to see him anymore. And that made it even worse. Let me say this. I love my mother. And her and I are very very close. And she did what she thought she had to do. And as I grew up, I realized she did what she needed to do, and she made the right choice, but she didn't have the understanding of how to go about it. So she basically just kidnapped me and pulled me away. At that age, I didn't understand it. All I knew is I wanted my father. So she started to tell me, you're not going to see him anymore. And I couldn't even comprehend that. And I fell into a depression, which I didn't know at the time. A lot of anxiety, crying on a regular basis. I remember there was a long chain link fence on the outside of the school that I went to with big fields all covered in snow. And I just remember every morning driving down the chain link fence and just crying like, I can't handle this. I don't understand this. And I would get out of the car and she'd look at me, she could tell, she's my mother, she could tell I was in pain, she could see the emotion in my face. And sometimes she'd sit there with me, and then other times she'd say, I gotta go to work, son, I gotta go to work, you gotta go to school. And I'd get out and I'd be crying. And what happens on a schoolyard when you're crying on a schoolyard? Other kids start to make fun of you. So this confusion of pain and depression and anxiety started to turn to anger, right? And then I would see people and I would cry. It affected my schoolwork in class. I remember the teacher calling my mother to the school and saying, hey, something's wrong here. Your son seems like he's distracted. Something's going on. And so I remember all these little things that were going on, but I still didn't understand what was going on. I just know I didn't feel it. I just know I didn't feel it. So each day, kind of the same thing, chain link fence, getting out of class, and I started to harden. And I look back, and what happened is the whole fight or flight, I kind of did a combination of the two. The innocent child, the loving child, got into the flight side, and internally, I protected him. I, being my new alter ego, was created. And with that, I'd get off that car and I'd be crying, but I'd have to turn into somebody else because I didn't want the ridicule. And I could remember looking into a kid's eyes. Just as soon as I walked that chain link fence and there they go, they start to laugh, they start to point, and I remember looking at them. And I thought, I'm never going to cry again. And I started to fight. I started to fight, and if you looked at me for more than 2 seconds, I assumed you were making fun of me. So I'd attack you. And I lived like that for the next 17 years of my life. 10 of those years, I spent the majority of them incarcerated. And I got out of San Quentin prison when I just under my 25th birthday, right before I turned 25. And I looked back at my life, and there was always this question, why? I had 3 whys, personally. Why do I feel the way I do? Because I felt that way for all those years, in and out of prison, fighting in the schoolyard. I joined gangs. I started doing drugs when I was 9 years old. From that 7-year age of that traumatic event happening in my life and not understanding what was going on, by 8 o'clock I was by age 8 I was hanging around with the neighborhood gang. By 9 I was doing drugs with them. In fact, I remember when we were like the youngsters, obviously 8, 9, 10 years old, and they had older brothers, and these guys were all in gangs. And so one of my buddies, he took a marijuana joint from his brother, and he brought it to my house. And in the morning, he knocked on my door before school, and he said, look what I have. And I looked at it, and I knew exactly what it was, because looking back, that's what my father was always smoking. That was one of the challenges that my household had. And I said, I know what to do with that. And at 9 years old, we went in the bushes before school, and we sparked it up, and we smoked this joint. And it never stopped from there. The older guys had beer, so we'd drink half of their beer, and we'd be drunk, and we'd be high, and we'd be fighting, and we'd be doing all this crazy stuff. And it really that became my life. That's what led me all the way through into a state of the prison life and prison gangs. So 9, I was doing drugs. By the time I was 13, I conceived my first child. He's 6 foot. So if you saw him next to me, you'd be like, who's that guy? He's 6 foot. He has 2 wonderful boys, my grandkids. And he's a great dad. He's a wonderful dad. He didn't go through any of the stuff that I lived. And I say, son, that's no thanks to me. What you did, there's anything you learned from me was what not to do. So he was conceived while I was 13, born just after I turned 14. Then at 14 was the first time I was actually arrested. And from that day, 14 years old, I was incarcerated over the next 10 years, never out more than 30 days, I think was my max that I stayed out of any type of facility. Juvenile facilities, halfway houses, work furloughs, and state prison. So when I got out of prison, I had those three questions that I've been asking myself my whole life. Why do I do what I do? Why do I act the way that I act? Why do I feel the way that I feel? Because all those three questions is what put me through all that destruction. I made decisions to do everything that I did. And give me 5 minutes. I don't know if I can do it in 5 minutes. I'm going to try. All right. So I asked those three questions, and it put me on a path. It put me on a journey. And when I was on parole, one of the greatest things that happened to me was my parole officer got out of prison. My parole officer said, "You have to go to college." And I was like, "What do you mean I have to go to college?" He said, "You have to go to college." So circumstance put me in college, and I learned two things. One is while you're in college, you get your general education plan, you have to take a psychology class. And Psychology 101 answered one of the beginning, kind of turned on the light switch for one of those questions, why do you do what you do? And environmentally, there are reasons why we do what we do. And I thought that, there were just, if this happened to you, you may act like this. If this happened to you, you may act like this. And I started going, wait a minute, that's a switch. There are things that we do because of our environment. I had never even heard that before. That was one. And then another thing was, at that age, I barely learned what an emotion was. And that we can express our emotions. And I learned that from my 3-year-old daughter. By that time, I had a 3-year-old daughter. And she went to the college daycare when I was in school. And there was a glass window that we can watch through and see how they're doing during the day. They didn't know we were there. And one morning, I call this story syrup on her pancakes. My daughter didn't like syrup on her pancakes. And she gets to school, and there's a new care provider there. And she's setting her up some breakfast, and she pours syrup on her pancakes. She's 3 years old. She looks at her pancakes, and she starts to cry. Well, that's what a 3-year-old would do. And I'm watching through the glass. And she starts to cry, and I'm like, oh, I gotta go get my baby girl. And I thought, so we said, just let's see what happens. So I said, okay, I want to see how they take care of my daughter. So the caretaker comes up and sits down. She says, what's the matter? My daughter's name is Christina. She says, what's the matter, Christina? And Christina's just crying. And she says, what's the matter, Christina? And she says, there's syrup on my pancakes. And the newer daycare didn't realize she didn't like syrup. And she goes, okay, so you're upset. Like she was talking to her. You're upset because there's syrup on your pancakes? And then she kind of calmed down. She looked and said, yeah. My daughter was like, yeah, I'm upset because there's syrup on my pancakes. So she used the instructor's words, so she was teaching her how to express it. She said, yeah, there's syrup on my pancakes, and I don't like that. And she continued to cry. And then the caretaker said, look, since you don't like syrup on your pancakes, I'm going to take these away. I'm going to put new pancakes. We're going to put applesauce like you like. She liked applesauce on her pancakes. We're going to put applesauce on your pancakes, and then everything's going to be fine. And I saw my daughter just kind of change her whole state. And she said, okay, yeah, I like applesauce on my pancakes. And she went from crying to, she expressed without even realizing, she expressed what was going on, and she felt better. So that was like the first aha, and I looked at it, and I was like, wow. All she did was talk about how she felt, and it looked like it changed her. So a couple days later, maybe a week or so later, I'm dropping her off again at the daycare, and I see this little boy getting out of the car with his mother, and he's bawling. He's just crying. He's upset. I guess he didn't want to go to school or whatever, and he's crying, and I'm kind of watching him walk by, and he's holding his mom's hand, same age, maybe 3, maybe 4, no older than 4. And he's holding his mother's hand. He says, he's crying. He says, Mom, I don't feel good this morning. I didn't want to get up. You made me get up. I had to get dressed. Now I'm going to school, and I don't want to go. And he's explaining to her exactly how he feels. And I'm just like shocked. I'm just like looking, and at that stage of my life, I was very recently out of prison, so I wasn't the greatest guy. I looked different. People tell me, you don't even look like the same guy anymore, because I lived that lifestyle. I led the lifestyle. But so I'm standing there, And I'm watching, but internally I'm just like, this kid just expressed everything he felt. I don't even know how to do that. I have no idea. And when he finished, she said something to him and he calmed down after he got that energy out. So there's two things that I learned that turned on switches for me, that there is a very important to understand what emotions you're feeling and then have the ability to express them. Because I've also learned that emotions are an energy, right? Good or bad. Love, happiness, we don't even realize how we express it, but we do. We give hugs. Right? Hey, how are you doing? You shake hands, you give each other a hug. That energy is coming through you, and you're letting it out. You're giving it away. But with negative emotions, sometimes that doesn't happen because we don't want to show that we're sad or that we're insulted. We don't want to express those things, so we get hit with it and we hold it in. And looking back, that's what happened when I was a child. I didn't even know how to express them. So I held these things in, and I became angry. So, cutting it short, there's a lot of those stories in this book, things that happened while I was in prison, things that happened while I was running the streets in gangs, and then how I learned to go from my head to my heart, live from my heart, instead of listening to stories that I would tell myself and taking stories that other people would tell me. At a very young age, the prosecutors would say I was a menace to society, I didn't belong in the streets. I bought into all that. So I've learned to control my energy, control my mind, and live from my heart. And if you'd like to learn more, it's on that book. Thank you.
Give it up for Raul one more time. Me on this one. We'll try this one. Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. How about a hand for the staff of the Sunset Temple here? Getting all the sound going, getting all the microphones going, and all that kind of stuff. So, how do you guys feel about Raul and the way that he told his story? We're here at a Speakers Academy, right? Learning about public speaking. So not only was his story moving, but how did you feel during his story? Like, anybody, how did you feel? What were your takeaways from the way that he spoke? Engaged, right? You felt totally engaged with him. You felt totally part of the story. What about the architecture of how he told it? Did you like that? Yeah, super awesome. Okay, so we're gonna go international now. I have the amazing husband of our next speaker here from all the way in Australia, and I'd like to introduce him to you guys. Come on here. It's great when you have support in your life, and Jen Cudmore, our next speaker, has her amazing husband here, Damien, and he's gonna talk a little bit about her and what she's speaking about, and then lead us into her amazing presentation. So let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Does anyone here ever feel weird? Ever feel out of place? Ever feel like you don't quite belong where you are?